Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. How are you this morning? Good day to you. I pray you're doing well on this sunny day. Temperatures are actually coming up a little bit. We might even get in the 60s today. Can you imagine it? It's so I hope you're finding some beauty in this day. Good morning, good morning. How are you today? Hey, Donna, good morning to you. Things are going well. Hope you can get some sunshine in today. Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. Little mug up this morning, little First Congregational Church mug, much coveted, never replicated. Good morning, everybody. All right. Hey, Vicki, good morning to you. Sunshine here, great. Ah, that's nice to hear. Good, good. Hello, hello. All right, let's get going this morning, friends. It is the 23rd day of April on this Thursday at 11:11, and I'm glad you're here and a part of this journey. That on this day, I've been thinking about this word. I heard a little story recently, and it just kind of got me about a guy by the name of Franz Liszt. We'll talk about him in a second. But the story was about practice and about the function of practice and what we practice and how we practice. And we use that word a couple different ways, right? We use the word as if we're trying to learn an instrument, we sit down and we practice. If we're trying to and with kind of an endeavor that, well, we're going to get better at it, right? But we also talk about our faith walk in the same way. We talk about the faith walk that we practice our religion. Do we practice our tradition? Do we practice? Are we in the practice of? Do we keep the disciplines of practice? Do we pray? Do we? What do we do in the context of our journeys? There's all these things that we use this word practice a few different ways, and yet it's actually, I think, the same way in many respects. The great William Blake. Blake is he's just one of the best. Like, if you've never gotten into William Blake, like, I get it. Like, 18th century English, maybe not your jam, but his poetry and the songs of heaven and hell. I mean, they really are something to delight in. And he writes this. He says, without unceasing practice, nothing can be done. Practice is art, and if you leave off, you are lost. And Blake's invitation to us is about practice. Now this comes from a little book that I have here. This is of little quotations. It's a little book of quotations that was sent to me a couple of years ago by my old wrestling coach, of all people. A fellow by the name of Jim Coffin, one of the greatest human beings ever walked the earth. I'm just a great guy. Went to Bowdoin College, became a lobsterman, became a wrestling coach, inspired generations of young men to be better than they were. Just a stellar human being. And if he found out what I was up to, and we got a chance to visit a while back, and he sent me this little book of quotes. And I'll dip into it every once in a while for our little journeys together. So, hey, there's a little behind the scenes moment. This is how the sausage gets made, friends. That but I've been thinking about this notion of practice, and then his invitation from Blake, and to think about all of those days back in the wrestling room and all the practices we went to, and the sweat and the grinding and the injuries and the ache of what happened, and also in the context of those practices, the formation that came from that, right? Because that's really what happens in the midst of practice. This takes us to our friend Franz Liszt. If you've never, so I put a link in the chat. If you're not in the habit of following classical piano, I don't blame you. Not ain't everybody's jam either. But Franz Liszt is considered, that you can make the argument he was the best composer, pianist ever to exist, ever to be alive, ever to walk the planet. Now there are people who fight about that. Some are Bach people, some are Beethoven people, whatever. But I don't want to get into that fight. But you can make that. There's not a top 5 list out there in the world that doesn't exist in terms of people who've set their fingers to the keys. That Franz Liszt doesn't make one of the top parts. And one of the things that made him great, was that he was known for his practice routines of how he would practice the piano. He practiced 4 to 5 hours a day. Now, that's not even counting the time he spent composing, the time he spent with all these other things. I put a little link on there, so if you want to go into the top 10 greatest hits of Franz Liszt, today's your day that you got the chance. But his routine of practice it's emulated. I mean, people will actually take up the method, the Liszt method of learning to become a pianist is actually out there. And this notion, but he was very clear to say one thing, that you don't practice to get better. You don't practice to actually become a better pianist, better at the keyboards. That's not the function of practice. And he would reject, he would chastise anybody, himself or any student that thought the reason I'm sitting down at the keyboard and I'm going to plunk out for 4 to 5 hours a day, that the goal of that practice session is to be better at the end of it than the beginning of it. He would reject that wholeheartedly, and he would fight anybody who said otherwise, who was very clear about this. He said, okay, well then, the obvious question would come to him, immediately after that. Well, if you're not practicing, you get better. Why are you practicing? And he would say, he would say that the first thing that he would do is to focus on his technique, not necessarily the song he was composing or playing, but to make sure the thing that he was doing well. Because this is the thing about practice, isn't it? Practice doesn't make perfect. We think practice makes perfect. You hear that phrase all the time. It's not true. That practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. That whatever you practice will become a permanent part of yourself. And that we can practice beautiful things, we can practice sloppy things, we can practice ugliness, we can practice joy, we can practice sorrow, that we can put all manner of practices in our lives, can't we? And we often do. And so his focus was never on I'm going to be better. I'm going to master this piece over the course of my 4 to 5 hours of practicing. He said, no. I'm going to focus on doing what I'm doing right now in the course of practice, and do it well. I'm going to do this moment well. And his goals, as he laid out, it was to become proficient technically. To develop technical skills, to develop the complex things. And the second goal that he had, he believed that was to, and get this, to foster an emotional connection with the music. So that because he was actually known. He was kind of like he was a rock star before there were rock stars. He would come out with these big, giant, long gloves, and he would make this kind of big, ornate thing of like throwing the gloves off and all that sort of stuff. Before Ozzy was out there, biting heads off bats. He had this incredible stage show, but it wasn't just show for Litz. It was actually the expressiveness of the performance was a way in which the emotional connection of him at the keyboard actually made him a better player, or actually made him more present in the playing in the music that he was creating, and to give more expression to the music that he was creating, which in the end made it better. But the goal was never to be better. Never was his goal to be better, and he would reject it anytime anybody pointed at it. This kind of gets us back to our little friend Blake, doesn't it? That there's our little poet. He says, without unceasing practice, nothing can be done. Are you beginning to see it a little bit? That what we practice, what we're spending our days practicing, whether it is the practice of our faith and our Christian walk, or whether it is learning the ukulele and putting our time in to practice learning a skill, or whether it's our practice of taking the trash out every Monday night, whatever our practices are that we find ourselves engaged in, that we often believe that we practice. We go to church. We do our disciplines, whatever they may be. We are part of the things so that we can be better, right? So we can play better. We can do better. We can feel better. We can this and when we hold that as the center, it actually becomes the distraction from the moment in which we find ourselves. Those incredible practices that we would put up with on the wrestling mat that we would be subjected to in when I was in high school on the wrestling team. Those incredible practices that Jim Coffin would put us through, they were in and of themselves a complete act. What would happen on the mat on Wednesday night or on a Saturday tournament was the fruit of that, but the branch, the blossom, the bud, and of all of it was laid out to that. And the branch and the blossom and the bud had their own function and had their own beauty and had their own experience. And so when we get back to Blake and we say, without unceasing practice, nothing can be done. That practice is art unto itself. That we begin to find ourselves in the realm of the Apostle Paul when he writes to the church in Galatia, because this was all prelude to get us to here. And he writes this. So just a little bit, but the Church of Galatia is, it's kind of this love letter in a way that there's this way of this incredible letter of encouragement and a letter of really laying out what it means to be a practicer, a one who practices what was called the way, which is the way of following Jesus. And that Galatians talks about love in many ways more than any of the other books of Paul. That he talks about the practice of love, the practice of being one who follows Jesus, and what this looks like. And all of the contentions there were many contentions, not just in that church, but in a lot of the churches about, well, who gets to practice, right? Like you hear about that all the time. Like who's in the in crowd, who's in the out crowd? Can the Gentiles that were not Jews be able to become Christians and followers? They seem like arcane questions to us, 2,000 years later. But the reality is we're having this conversation all the time. Who gets to be in? Who gets to be out? Who can I be in relationship with? Who can I not be in relationship with? Who's my teammate? Who's not my teammate? And the greatest division of that within the church and within the early church, particularly, was the question that all was the idea of circumcision is what that all often came down to. Was the good Jewish boys, when they were born, they were circumcised, and the Gentiles weren't. And so there was this, and so that was the dividing line of identity. And so between the world of clean or unclean, and and in the midst of that great debate, Paul writes this: For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love. What is that? That's our practice, friends. That's our practice. That's the practice that we put into our lives. It's what we practice. And it's not just are we practicing Christians, or are we practicing ukulele, but it is the practice of our lives. That taking what we believe, our faith, whatever that might be, and expressing it through love is the act of practice. And practice, to go back to our good friend William Blake, is art. That the art of our very being, the art of our very lives, the creation that we are making, the painting that you and I are painting every day when we take our brush out, when we wake up in the morning and we begin every minute and every second and every hour of every day, begin to apply our colors to our days, the practice is the art of our lives. It's not just behavior, it's not even just belief, but it is those things that through love we are expressing. We are making manifest in this world. And so, friends, I want to encourage you to listen to a little list today. You got your top 10 hits on the thread if you want to pick those out. Because his instinct and what made him, I would suggest, the greatest pianist of all times, was that he understood that the point of practice was not to get better. The point of going to church was not to be a better person. The point of picking up a ukulele even was not to be a better ukulele player. Though both of those things may be byproducts of what we do. But when we sit down, when we come to the moment, when we sit down with the people that we love around our dinner table, when we greet a stranger in Walmart, when we find ourselves in the course of our days, when we greet somebody in an office, wherever we find ourselves in whatever moment we're into, that we take up the practice of expressing our faith through love, and that practice of art is the very practice of us being the instrument of God we are called to be. And if that we're constantly looking at it through this lens, as Litz was so phobic of saying, like, no, it's not. The point of practice is not to get better. The point of practice is to technically do the things of our day a little bit better, to have a little bit better interaction than we had the day before. And that's not a better interaction. That's not to say a qualitative one, but to technically master the moment in which we're in, to be able to get our fingering right on this moment, to be able to get our chords harmonious in this second, and that to do that correctly and to do that properly. And when we get to the concerts, when we get to the mat, when we get to the big moments of our lives, those skills have been laid down, and maybe we will be better. Maybe we'll be the very best. But if we're spending our time trying to get better, if we're spending our times in this question, and the whole better thing is this circumcised, uncircumcised question. Like, am I in? Am I out? Am I a good boy? Am I a good girl? Am I a bad boy? Am I a bad girl? Am I pleasing the people around me? Am I not pleasing the people around me? Am I making everybody happy? Am I doing all the right things? Am I hitting all the things that the book tells me to do? We will lose the very art of our life, because, friends, without unceasing practice, nothing can be done. Practice is art. And if you leave off, you are lost. My hope, friends, is that you will hear the words of the Apostle Paul this day and remember that the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. And that is our practice. Peace and grace to you all, my friends. We will pick it up next week with another 11:11. Tomorrow we have Mary Catherine Fletcher at noon for our organ concert. We'll be gathering at 5 o'clock for our movie night. We're watching the David animation. It's animated, so it's kid friendly, but it's actually I don't need to say but, and it is a great telling of the David story. If you're ever curious about the David story, there's some great elements of that. It's not just it's not just debauchery and hitting somebody in the head with a rock. There's other elements there. So it'll be a great night. We'll have some popcorn on Sunday. I will be away. TC Cornite will be here. Tom Cornite will be here. Great preacher, great guy. He'll be talking about the four elements of what it is to be church. Brilliant and good stuff. Hope you'll be a part of that worship service. And we'll pick it up next week. Oh, actually, we won't pick it up next week. I am on vacation next week. I am away. I'm taking a knee. I'm going to go spend some time with my family, and we will be away for next week. We may or may not have some best of episodes posted for you, but just know that peace and grace to you all, and we'll pick it up the week after next with another 11:11.